Shut up. Everyone understands this is the first game of an advantage final between Stanford B, who has the advantage, and Illinois, who does not.
Yes.
All right, you guys want to check your buzzers? Sweet. Get a ring out of that. All right. Both teams ready? Good luck. House of one. One man who took part in this event related its narrative to Mayhew Folger, including the story of a Bible that had been given to him by Ned Young. A book about the cause and consequences of this event was written by John Barrow, includes a copy of the journal by James Morrison. Another account of this event was first written by a man named Gabriel Marcel at the National Library of France, but that narrative was bought for 300 francs by another man who published the story with his novel, The Begum's Fortune. A more popular account of this event from the perspective of Roger Byam, a personification of Peter Heywood, was written by the team of Charles Nordhoff and James Norman Hall. That account is the first in a trilogy, followed by the books Men Against the Sea and Pitcairn's Island. For 10 points, Tim.
Like the Muni on the Bounty.
Nice.
Yeah.
10 points, your bonus. In a humorous piece by this composer, the soloist rhythmically taps the keys of a typewriter. 10 points each named this American composer of light concert music, such as The Waltzing Cat, Blue Tango, and Plink Plank Plunk. He also composed the popular Christmas song Sleigh Ride.
Maybe Burl Ives did not do that. Burl
He did
Ives.
not indeed. It's Leroy Anderson. Many of Anderson's pieces were premiered by this orchestra, which was conducted for many years by Arthur Fiedler. It mainly performs light classical music and puts on an annual 4th of July concert at the Hatch Shell.
Hat shell.
Not the Boston.
It's gonna be
Not
a
the Boston Pops.
No, it's gonna be LA.
Answer.
Boston Pops.
That's right.
Yeah.
These concerts, officially named for their longtime conductor Henry Wood, began as performances of light classical music. They take place every summer in the Royal Albert Hall.
Oh, is this the proms?
Yeah, proms.
Yeah, proms.
20.
Something.
Also, too, at one moment in this piece, a harp signals a glimpse of sunlight as the music reaches C major. As it builds toward a climax indicated con gran suono, the central melody fades over a quietly beating drum while the accompanying strings play col legno tremolos. The composer's notes atop the original score describe the title figure of this piece anthropomorphically as majestically singing. The central solo melody of this piece is occasionally answered by brief phrases from the cello or viola and is joined by a muted horn after a long period of silence from the brass. Originally conceived as a prelude to the composer's opera The Building of the Boat, its main melody is played by an English horn, and it is the second part in a suite about the adventures of Lemminkainen. For 10 points, identify this tone poem by Jean.
Swamp to know. Right. I don't know why.
Bonus, answer the following about the rheology of Earth's mantle for 10 points each. The crust and the upper solid component of the mantle that compose the lithosphere, which floats on this high viscosity component of the mantle, sometimes called the low velocity zone.
Just answer.
A proposed mechanism for the viscosity of the mantle is this plastic deformation mechanism, in which the namesake crystallographic defects propagates through a lattice.
What kind of defect would it be? I'm confused. Hole. Hole.
It's called the dislocation creep.
Oh, makes sense.
Data from this process provides some of the best information on the mantle's rheology. In this process, the Earth's crust slowly returns to its original shape once the ice sheets that existed on top of it melted away.
Isostatic rebound.
That's right. 20. Puzzle 3. In one of these works, the speaker compares himself to a hydropic drunkard and a night scouting thief in lamenting his suffering. In another, the speaker invokes treasonous pilgrims to describe his black soul. A poem in this collection asks the addressee to pour new seas in mine eyes, that so I might drown my world with my weeping earnestly. The 11th of them imagines the narrator as Christ commanding his Jewish executioners to pierce my side, while number 17, which begins, "Since she whom I loved hath paid her last debt," has often been read as an elegy to the poet's wife, Anne Moore. In another of these poems, the speaker compares himself to a usurped town and asks the addressee to break, blow, burn, and make me new. Often titled by their first lines, poems.
Holy sonnet. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bonus, this work distinguishes between 3 types of substance: matter, form, and the compound of matter and form. For 10 points each, name this work by Aristotle, which attempts to explain locomotion and sensation by analyzing what substance comprises the soul.
Substance physics, probably.
Physics.
Answer.
Physics.
It's De Anima.
Oh, well.
In De Anima, Aristotle proposes 3 types of souls: the rational, the sensitive, and this most simple of the souls, which is the only type of soul that plants possess.
Why did like competitive? That's not competitive.
Nutritive, or nutrition. This other ancient philosopher wrote an inquiry into plants that scientifically discusses various ways plants grow. He succeeded Aristotle as the leader of Lyceum.
Who's after? So.
Yes. Theophrastus. 0 points.
That was the easy bit. Damn.
Cosmoport. While serving as special assistant to the Secretary of Defense, this politician infamously joked, "It doesn't look too bad to me," leading Jerome Kavanaugh to respond, "Usually the city isn't burning." As a result of that trip, this man wrote a report to the president on the cause of the 12th Street riot in Detroit. Late in his career as special envoy to the UN Secretary General, he negotiated a namesake plan which achieved 2 brief ceasefires between Franjo Tudjman and Slobodan Milosevic during the 1991 Croatian War, but was replaced by the Z4 plan. He was also the deputy to Averell Harriman at the 1968 Vietnam peace talks in Paris. Like Hillary Clinton, he wrote a memoir titled Hard Choices, recounting his opposition to the war hawk policies of National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski. He resigned his highest office in reaction to Operation Eagle Claw, after which he was replaced by Edmund Muskie. For 10 points, name this man has succeeded Henry Kissinger as Secretary of State and served in that office under Jimmy Carter.
Vance?
That's right.
Dude, good job.
Most chapters in this novel often end with observations in which the author himself steps in and provides moralizing commentary on the tar and feathering or imprisonment that just occurred. And what's each name this 1815 novel considered an American Don Quixote, which follows the journeys of the bog-trotter Tigo Reagan and his master John Farago across America.
Tigo Reagan.
We
Reagan Don.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yes?
Don Quicksilver.
It's called Modern Chivalry, which was written by this early American author who founded the school that became the University of Pittsburgh. He collaborated with a contemporary poet on the wacky novel Father Bombo's Pilgrimage to Mecca.
Yo, I've heard of this. Like,
Yes?
Or-
Hugh Henry Brackenridge. That collaborator with Brackenridge was this poet of the American Revolution who also wrote The Wild Honeysuckle and The Indian Burying Ground.
for now.
Yeah, 10 points. Puzzle 5. The hepatitis C protein NS3 acts as both a protease and as one of these proteins. The nuclear protein MTR4P and the mitochondrial protein SUV3P are examples of the SCI2 family of these proteins. They're not dinins or kinesins, but the rolling and inchworm models are proposed mechanisms for one of these proteins called PCRA.
Like kind of a chaperone.
No.
Okay.
Take 5. One type of these proteins contains a Q motif to control ATP binding, as well as a Walker B motif containing an aspartate, glutamine, alanine, aspartate sequence. One type of these proteins is a hexamer, which uses NTP hydrolysis to translocate along its substrate. Examples of these proteins include UBRD, RECQ, dead box proteins, and DNAB. These enzymes are loaded onto ORA sites where they break the hydrogen bonds between nucleobases, initiating replication. For 10 points, name these enzymes which generate a replication fork by unwinding double-stranded DNA.
Okay, so
The bonus, together with David Marshall, this man took part in the 1995 Balling talks, which brought an end to the emergency, sending communist leader Chin Peng into exile in Thailand. Was each named this man who then became the first prime minister of independent Malaysia after leading a delegation of the Alliance Party to gain autonomy from Britain.
Tunku Abdul Rahman. Tunku? Just the Tunku Abdul Rahman.
Yeah. This term, which comes from a Sanskrit word meaning son of the soil, was used in Malaysia to refer to native Malay people. These people were preferred under the initial constitution and the new economic policy, causing strife with the Chinese Malaysians who accounted for a large percentage of the population.
They're on like ethnic group of Malaysia?
It's like a Malay term, I think.
That's right. They're called Bumiputras.
Yeah.
This very recently deceased man, the first Prime Minister of Singapore and the leader of the People's Action Party, repeatedly tried to merge Singapore with Malaysia, but Tunku Rahman stonewalled him. Yeah, 20 points. Puzzle 6. A son of this man fought alongside Leontius during the Trojan War and buried Calchas in Colophon. One story claimed that this man was killed by a dog with the unoriginal name of Cerberus while attempting to gain access to Cora, the daughter of the Molossian king Adoneus. This father of Polypoetes is mocked by Lelex for objecting to a story told by Oculus in the Metamorphoses. After driving a herd of cattle... Good buzz. Your bonus, the coupling between two of these waves allows for energy transfer between two nearly adjacent waveguides. For 10 points each, name this kind of wave whose intensity decays exponentially as it propagates away from the interface in which the wave was formed. They're evanescent.
That's why I meant to say.
Evanescent waves are the cause of the
Yeah,
frustrated form of
okay.
this effect. In this effect, light incident on a boundary between two media at an angle larger than the critical angle produces no refracted ray in the second medium.
So like, it's total internal reflection.
In an optical fiber, this is the critical angle of incidence below which a light ray will remain in the fiber due to repeated total internal reflection. The sign of this angle gives the numerical aperture of the fiber.
This has a name, doesn't it? I had to derive this on the homework, but I didn't know what it was called. I don't know.
No.
Acceptance angle, you get 10 points.
I had to derive it.
Concept 7. This religious leader's followers included David Darrow, who was arrested by local commissioners after being suspected of providing a flock of sheep to the enemy. As a youth, this figure participated in the silent meditations organized by James and Jane Wardley, who were themselves inspired by commissars. According to Frederick W. Evans, who wrote a leading history of the group this person is affiliated with, a special manifestation of divine light appeared to this figure at the age of 22. Originally from Manchester, several followers, including James Whittaker and John Hocknell, joined this self-proclaimed Bride of the Lamb in settling at Waterfleet near the city of Albany, where she founded the United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing and preached communal ownership of goods and celibacy. For 10 points, identify the Shaker leader known by the epithet Mother.
It's like Mother, Mary,
No.
that, but...
And?
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, I need more.
Oh.
To you. Teresa.
Okay. I don't have any more.
And Lee.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, puzzle 8. added a new command called swap_gs so that the GS base can be quickly switched to the kernel GS base. It assigns interrupts with a value in between 1 and 15 through the use of CR8 so that tasks can be prioritized. This system also supports a mode of RIP relative addressing so that position-independent code can be written with the base pointer as a reference. Its other advantages include the fact that a task state segment is no longer needed and a long mode in which approximately 40 bits are reserved for physical addressing. Products that use it include the Jaguar, which can be found inside the PS4 and Xbox One. This instruction set architecture was first developed by AMD, who first used it in their Opteron processors, though it was
So it's like x86-64.
yes.
Nice.
Jump.
Go to
Work.
Cadbury.
Huge bonus. Answer the following about colonial decorative arts for 10 points each. Between 1770 and 1830, Samuel McIntyre and Duncan Fife made furniture in this American style, including the chest-on-chest of William Lemon. It's analogous to the German style of Biedermeier.
Federal style? Or is that's architecture? Oh.
So, just go.
Federalist.
Oh, it's gonna be just federal. No.
Federal style. Mark that if you want, but the federal style was directly influenced by this other eponymous style named for a trio of Scottish neoclassical interior designers. Two of this style's namesakes, Robert and John, designed the Royal Exchange of Edinburgh.
All that.
Don't hate me.
Answer.
McMurray.
Adam style or the Adamesque style. Another federal style decorative artist was Paul Revere, who became renowned for making furnishings out of this metal. A portrait by John Copley shows him with a teapot made out of this substance.
Silver.
10 points. 9. A collection by this author that was first translated into English by Georg D. Schade includes a story in which the narrator and his sick brother's wife Natalia arranged the brother's death during a pilgrimage to a shrine at the title place. The narrator of one of this author's short stories worries that Tasha will end up a whore like her two sisters after a cow is washed away by a flood. 35 years after a dispute over cattle pasturing caused the main character of one of this man's stories to kill Don Lupe Terreros, the arrival of a firing squad prompts that character to make the title plea to his son Justino. This author of Talpa, Because We Are So Poor, and Tell Them Not to Kill Me, wrote a novel adored by Gabriel Garcia Marquez in which ghosts described as yes. Juan Lupo is correct. Bonus, at the namesake fortress on the River Seine, Philip and Gautier d'Aulnay were tortured and flayed after they were discovered to be carrying the purses of 3 French princesses which they received at a puppet show in this incident. For 10 points each, name this 1314 scandal during the late reign of Philip the Fair, which saw the she-wolf of France, Isabella, allow her sisters-in-law to be imprisoned.
Oh, what would we call that? That's a pretty good idea. That was alright.
Answer.
No.
It's the Tour de Nesle affair. The Tour de Nesle affair has hastened the downfall of this French dynasty, which ended with Charles IV in 1328 after having been established by a man named Hugh in 987 CE. It's fine. This prior to the Tour de Nesle affair, Philip the Fair had this last Grand Master of the Knights Templar burned at the stake in front of Notre Dame.
Shots in the leg.
Right, 20 points. Toss up. In one painting, this artist depicted numerous Catholics with bloody backs and pointed hats who were whipping themselves while men in black hoods controlled the crowd. An interior night scene by this artist depicts 4 dunce-capped men at an auto da fe. Both of those paintings, the procession of the flagellants and the Inquisition scene, are part of this artist's program that illustrates religious mass hysteria while attacking the reign of the felon king. One painting by this artist, which is named for the feminine aspect of the demon, it depicts 2 levitating men pointing at a plateau as soldiers on the bottom right aim their rifles at them. Another painting by this artist of Asmodea features his mistress Leocadia Weiss as the title seductress. He made those paintings while at the Quinta del Sordo.
Oh, yeah.
Oops. Edward Said asserted that this novel works so effectively because its politics and aesthetics are, so to speak, imperialist, in that it depicts a world in which non-imperialist alternatives are unthinkable. Once each named this novel, which was attacked for its failure to give human expression to its African characters, and Chinua Achebe's An Image of Africa, which declares Conrad was a bloody racist.
Yeah, it's Darkness.
Yes. Mustafa Said describes having sex with a lot of white women before abandoning the West to return to Sudan in this Tayyib Salih novel, which can be seen as a sort of reverse Heart of Darkness.
The season of migration to the north.
Right. Captain Dunn's crew is slowly killed during a Heart of Darkness-like trip to the interior of Guyana in the Palace of the Peacock, for the first novel by this author. Conradian themes also appear in his novels The Far Journey of Udin and The Secret Ladder.
Quiroga.
Wilson Harris, the Upper Guyana Quartet.
Oh.
320. At the half.
110, 105.
Agreed.
Cool. House of 11. 3 years before this event, a journalist using the pen name Harry Alice was killed after being accused of accepting Belgian bribes, preventing his plans from being released to the Prince of Arenberg. The run-up to this incident saw one party abrogate the McKinnon Treaty, which would have surrendered territory as far north as the Lotto Enclave. That led Edward Grey to issue a warning in a speech given on behalf of Archibald Primrose. Prior to this incident, Major J.A.L. MacDonald was initially chosen to conduct a secret operation after news about the steamer Fidair and its mission reached the government of Lord Salisbury. Subsequently, the former victor at the Battle of Omdurman was tabbed.
Shoshona?
That's right.
That's right. He's from that too.
This man's landmark book was inspired by Paul Gauthier's tract, The Poor, Jesus, and the Church. And what's each named this Dominican priest from Peru, who became the father of liberation theology after writing the 1971 book, A Theology of Liberation. He coined the notion of God's preferential option for the poor in his speeches and wrote, We drink from our own wells.
Yeah, because this is liberation theology. If only we on this word.
Answer.
No.
His name is Gustavo Gutierrez. This Archbishop of San Salvador became a martyr hero of liberation theology after he was assassinated in 1980 while giving Mass in the wake of an Opus Dei celebration. He's sometimes dubbed the patron saint of the poor in El Salvador. And
Father, no.
Oscar Romero.
Oh, I should know. that.
Another leader of liberation theology, Juan Segundo, met Gutierrez in Belgium while studying under this order, which was founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola, and studies the spiritual exercises.
Yeah, that's what we call
Hmm?
Yeah.
Jesuits.
Yeah. Anyways. 12. This philosopher rejected the internal consistency of Plato's account of the fable of Guy Jesus' ring in a work in which a Christian, an Epicurean, and a Stoic debate what is the highest good. In his major work of language, this humanist, who authored De Vero Bono, quotes 30 pages of Quintilian's Institutio Oratoria, since he has nothing new to add about the various forms of argumentation. He wrote a 3-volume project that attempted to refute the grammars of Priscian, Donatus, and Servius, as well as the scholasticism of Aristotle, titled The Replowing of Dialectic and Philosophy. As a philologist, he authored a handbook on the Latin language titled Elegantiae Linguae Latinae. Interest in that language led him to author another treatise that argued that a certain Roman ruler must have hid his true nature from his relatives and friends if Pope Sylvester I was really given authority over the entirety of the Western Roman Empire. Follow? Yes.
Oh, that's what I do.
Your Honor, Roger Farmer criticized the University of Minnesota's calibrators, Ed Prescott and Tom Sargent, for relying on this theory. And what's each named this new classical theory associated with Sweetwater schools of economics, which argues that the namesake phenomena are driven by technology shocks and monetary shocks.
It's business cycles.
Business cycle.
I need more.
Well, that's unfortunate. I don't know what else to say.
What do you got?
No.
Real business cycles.
Oh,
Yeah.
A devastating early critique of real business cycle theory by this one-time president of Harvard analogizes it to a tent flapping in the breeze since it has no predictions absent strong assumptions placed on its parameters.
Okay.
Summers?
Yes. A key tenet of RBC models is this 3-word phrase which suggests shocks propagate because investment in period T only results in productive capital in some later period. This phrase is paired with aggregate fluctuations in Kidland and Prescott's early paper on RBC.
So, like, there's like a delay or something.
Yeah, I
I don't know what to call it.
Answer.
No.
Time to build.
Oh, that's
Good chat.
that's why there's time.
13. This work's narrator forgets to bring a dog with him when he visits the supposedly poisonous grotto of the dog, making it impossible to see whether it will kill a dog in a minute and a half. In another section, the narrator reads about St. Philip Neri's heart, which was inflamed with so much divine love that it burst his ribs. This book also relates a story in which a relic hunter caused a wart to appear on the jaw of the Sphinx. In an early chapter, a fellow named Mr. Blucher believes he is ruined when he orders a dinner that appears too costly for his compatriots. The narrator of this book tells the legend of the 7 sleepers after arriving in Ephesus. This book incorporated a series of letters that had appeared in the Daily Alta California and documents a trip aboard the Quaker City. The success of this book led its author to follow up with a similar A Tramp Abroad.
Innocence abroad.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, there is the sentence.
Bonus. This technique, which is similar to FLIP, can be used to determine the diffusion coefficient for a molecule in a lipid bilayer. And each name this technique in which a cell membrane is exposed to a light pulse, after which a confocal microscope is used to measure the normalized intensity of a certain process, which rapidly returns to 1 over time.
So I think they want frap.
Non-fluorescent proteins can still be studied by FRAP by labeling them with this protein first discovered in the jellyfish Aquaria. Yes. 11 anti-parallel strands in the structure of GFP form one of these structures, which come in up and down and jelly roll types. In this structure found in many porins, the strands are coiled such that the first strand is bonded to the last one.
Beta barrel.
Yes, 30 points.
That's good.
14. Recent excavations in this country's Bose Basin have unearthed the Aetulian axe, which repudiates the theory of the Mobius line. In 2012, the largest ever feathered dinosaur of genus Eutyrannus was discovered in this country. A French anthropologist working in this country argued that galactic, earth, life, and consciousness were the 4 types of evolution, which he incorporated into his later book, The Phenomenon of Man. In 1978, the elongated fossilized skull of Dolly Man was found in this country, providing some physical evidence of man in the Pleistocene. Johann Gunnar Andersen found 2 teeth in a cave near this country's Chicken Bone Hill. A Jesuit anthropologist working in this country named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin worked with Davidson Black to discover the fossilized remains of a Homo erectus in the Western Hills near Jocodian.
China?
Yes.
It was okay. Yeah. Records got all the way to China.
You notice this fictional place is located just north of a tropical island called Galdine, and it was ruled by Julius Brenzida, who marries Rosina, but fathers a daughter known as AGA with Geraldine Sidonia. For 10 points each, identify this fictional land that first appeared after its 2 creators grew tired of being minimized in a game about the Glasstown Confederacy. It was the setting of poems like Remembrance and The Prisoner.
I don't know what's going on. Oh, I mean, which poet is Glastonshire?
Gondal.
Oh.
Gondal figures heavily in the juvenilia of these two authors, who later went on to write the novels Agnes Grey and Wuthering Heights, name both.
And Emily, and A and E Bronte.
Unlike her sister Emily, Anne Bronte completed a second novel. That novel, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, is narrated by this man who falls in love with Helen Graham, the title character, only to learn that she is still married to Arthur Huntington.
Some like pretentious name. Percival.
Gilbert. Gilbert Markham. What do you think?
That's his name.
15. According to one account, this man planted 84 mulberry trees to feed silkworms after reading a manual on the subject, and he hosted a group at his home known as Chiquita Francia because they studied French books. Known as El Zorro, or the Fox, for his cunning, he met his end at the wells of Bajan after he was tricked into believing a shipment of weapons was there for him to take. His key victory over General Torcuato Trujillo at Monte de las Cruces is now commemorated by La Marquesa National Park. After a meeting at Charo, he directed his subordinate Jose Morelos to raise troops on the southern coast. This man, captured and executed after the Battle of Calderon Bridge, gained fame after he joined the Querétaro conspiracy and allegedly shouted "Long live Ferdinand VII" and "Death to bad government" out of a window, an event called the Grito de Dolores.
Oh, just like Hidalgo?
That's right.
Yeah.
He wrote as a legend blamed these events on the Chickasaw chief Reelfoot, who had a clubfoot, and kidnapped an Indian native of another tribe, bringing disaster to his people. What's each named a series of 4 earthquakes beginning in 1811, named for a fault line in a Missouri town. Accounts of these quakes claim that they created the world's largest sand boil and that the Mississippi River ran backwards.
New Madrid.
During the earthquakes, the steamboat New Orleans was making its first bull run on the Mississippi. 4 years earlier, Robert Fulton had designed this first commercially successful steamboat, originally called the North River Steamboat, which ferried between New York City and Albany.
Called like the Cooper or something? Or like the Fulton?
But
That's
anyway,
his
no,
name.
God.
Like the Tom
Answer.
Thumb? The Tom
That's the Claremont.
Oh.
At New Madrid in 1862, during the Civil War, John Pope and a flotilla under Andrew Foote put siege to an island named for this number. The taking of this island resulted in the Confederates losing vital position on a bend of the Mississippi River.
Like a number, like island number 5 or something. I
Go
don't
with
know.
your gut, man.
5.
10.
Oh, whatever.
Oh, wait.
There's also ways to get on that boat. What's the score?
205.
Agreed.
I'll see it now. 16. This ligand is the main one found in a Cheney cluster. 4 of these ligands are found in Coleman's reagent. Walter Keever synthesized many coordination complexes containing this ligand. This is the main ligand found in the cobalt catalyst, which was originally used in the OXO process for hydroformylation. Along with cyanide and nitric oxide, this ligand lies at the top of the strong field end of the spectrochemical series. This ligand has a vibrational frequency of 2143 inverse centimeters in the free state, but when bound to a metal, this frequency decreases to 1700 to 2100 inverse centimeters due to pi back bonding.
I'm gonna say carbon monoxide.
You're correct.
Yeah, what was
Hey, for just one each. Answer the following about artists who depict the semen of Vespucci. The title figure of the Botticelli painting, who gracefully stands on a cockle-shell and appears to be about to be ruled by an hour, is thought to be a portrait of Simonetta Vespucci.
Yeah.
This artist painted a profile portrait of Simonetta Vespucci, who has an exposed bosom and an asp coiled around her neck. His painting, The Forest Fire, was inspired by a passage in Lucretius' De Rerum Natura that describes the emergence of the different animals that occurred when the world was born.
Who painted a forest fire? And people, there's a Tipple.
His name is Piero, or Piero di Cosmo.
Okay.
This art historian's essay, Father Time, made the case that Piero di Cosmo's depiction of Hylas and the nymphs was actually a depiction of the finding of Vulcan on Lemnos. That essay appears in this man's Studies in Iconology.
And I don't know this art historian.
Panofsky.
That's right.
20 points. Or Rosanowski.
Old, that's it.
That's an art historian. Also 17, the protagonist of this novel stores his liquors in a mouth organ and believes that each of his alcohols corresponds to a different musical instrument. In another section of this novel, the protagonist is inspired by reading Dickens to explore London, but is satisfied after hearing English speakers in a tavern in Dieppe. After having his tooth extracted by the dentist Gavnax, the protagonist of this novel sees that the tortoise whose shell he encrusted with jewels.
Au revoir. Au revoir.
Said it the first time.
That's great.
That's all that counts.
Bonus, this set of rules predicts a value of 214 nanometers for alpha beta unsaturated ketones for 10 points each. Name this set of rules used to predict the wavelength of maximum absorbance for conjugated dienes, polyenes, and carbonyls.
The Woodward-Pfizer.
That's right, the Woodward-Pfizer rules are used to predict absorbances in this form of spectrophotometry, which is named for the 2 wavelength ranges it comprises.
UV-Vis.
The Woodward-Pfizer rules predict that each double bond extending the conjugation of a diene shifts the wavelength of maximum absorption by this value.
What the fuck is that? Like the equivalent
Yeah.
energy of, I don't know what to say.
30 nanometers.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
20.
I don't know what
18. The strength of this phenomenon is maximized when the composition of a material is near the morphotropic phase boundary. The decrease in the resonant frequency of a material exhibiting this phenomenon when a mass is added to it is calculated using the Sauer-Brei equation, which is the basis behind QCM instruments. This phenomenon's longitudinal coefficient is unusually negative in PVDF. The coefficients of this phenomenon are located in a rank 3 tensor, which is found in two coupled equations which relate the d field to the stress tensor and the e field to the strain tensor. This phenomenon occurs in ceramics that lack inversion centers.
Uh-oh, also kills electricity anyways.
That makes sense. I want to name these Italian librettists for 10 points each. The first professor of Italian literature at Columbia College was this man, whose most enduring fame comes from his libretti for Così fan tutte, Don Giovanni, and the Marriage of Figaro.
Da Ponte.
Alberto Franchetti wrote the opera La Figlia di Iorio for to a libretto by this playwright of Francesca da Rimini and La Gioconda. His novels include The Flame of Life and The Triumph of Death.
Yeah. What's his name? No.
Gabriele D'Annunzio.
Yeah.
The words of the popular canzonetta La Partenza were written by this member of the Arcadian Academy, who wrote the libretti Di Done Abbandonata and La Clemenza da Tito, though the latter was rewritten by Caterina Mazzolo when Mozart used it.
Well, it was unfortunate. There was an easy one to find here. I'm just really bad.
Answer.
No.
This guy's name is Metastasio,
Okay.
or Pietro Trapasio.
Sleep.
You're 10.
Okay.
19. A likely fictional account and defense of this man's life was written hundreds of years later by Lucas Tudensis. He composed many letters to his younger associate Braulio, who composed a posthumous list of his works called the Renotatio. This man, who was not Lucretius, dedicated his text on the nature of things to the ruler Sisyphus, a friend of his whom he praised as an enlightened king. This man's younger sister Florentina allegedly held claim over 40 convents, and at her request he wrote his two books against the Jews, while his younger brother Fulgentius served as bishop of Astigi. He gained his highest office by replacing his older brother Leander, who had been a favorite of Pope Gregory I. This man is remembered for composing a 20-book encyclopedia which offers to explain the origin of several words entitled the Etymologies. For 10 points, name this doctor of the church, a saint who served under the Visigoths in Spain as Archbishop in Seville.
Isidore.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
He's from Seville. Demonis. Where is it? Answer the following with Olaf Palme for 10 points each. Palme wrote his honors thesis on this hero of his, the leader of the United Auto Workers Union, whom Palme interviewed in Detroit. While taking the photograph, this man was beaten at the River Rouge Ford plant in the 1937 Battle of the Overpass.
UAE thing.
It's Walter Reuther.
Oh,
Some theories suggest that Palme was murdered as a result of the Bofors scandal, in which over $8 billion of weapons were supplied to this country, largely due to Palme's friendship with its leader, Rajiv Gandhi, India.
India.
Yeah. Palme was a friend and protege of this man who had served as Prime Minister of Sweden from 1946 to 69, often in collaboration with the Farmers League before he was succeeded by Palme.
I don't know.
You know the guy after World War II?
What you got?
Olaf.
Haga Erlander.
I'm mispronouncing his name.
You get 10s. And the last toss-up in the first game of this two-game fight. A 1991 Miles Davis recording of this song appears on the same track as the song Dig on the album At La Villette. According to its composer, the song was inspired by the clackety-clack, clackety-clack noises of a horse-drawn wagon moving over cobblestones. This song, which is usually recorded in the key of concert F, opens the head in which the 9th and 10th bars are repeated twice for a total of 16 bars in its blues form. A Simha Arom and Genevieve Torel LP inspired a version of this song in which Bill Summers imitated the sound of a himnawoo by blowing into a beer bottle. This song originally appeared in the album Taken Off, but was the subject of a popular recording by Mongo Santa Maria in 1963. A later recording made by its composer added in funk elements and is found on the album Headhunters. For 10 points, name this Herbie Hancock jazz standard, named after a purveyor of a certain type of fruit.
Watermelon.
That's right. Bonus, answer the following: what a man who pioneered the field of garbology for 10 points each. This anthropologist, together with his grad students, collected trash from various parts of Tucson, Arizona in his garbage project in order to study the consumption habits of rich and poor Americans. He published his results in his book, Rubbish, The Archaeology of Garbage.
No.
It was William Rothia, or Rothschild. Before his death, Rothia left Arizona to become a professor at this university, where Philip Zimbardo conducted his prison experiment.
Those guys.
Rothia alludes in his work to this earlier American anthropologist who referred to culture as consisting of shreds and patches. He helped develop the discipline of salvage ethnography by conducting extensive fieldwork among the Crow Indians. Lowy, Robert Harry Lowy. That's that.
Given my understanding that neither of you were involved in a tiebreaker to get to the top bracket, correct? You did not play round 13.
Oh. Oh, right.
But did they hear anything from anyone about it?
It packet that is not. Alright, well, an answer line may have accidentally been spoiled to me by Jacob Reed. If it is on a Spanish play.
Well, you didn't have to say it that loudly.
This packet cannot be discussed outside of the room. And just in case, I would like.
Wait, so like, we're gonna leave.
Just in case, I would like Penn and Chicago also to leave.
Yeah.
Just in case something happens with the Finals 1 packet and we need anything from Finals 2.
So this is finals 2 being right now? I need to go.
Yeah,
I want to go back and then go board score for the finals.
Wait, so what, you're gonna read finals 2 to them?
Yes.
Okay, finals 1 is.
Finals 1, and Chicago
this,
Penn
it'll be
8.
clear.
It's completely clear, but just in case something happens, I need Chicago and Penn 8. We're on board with that, migrate.
Yeah.
Like,
I know
And
it's the
the finals.
yeah. We should be done by about 1. So.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be fine. Just head, you guys head straight to Ambulatory 8. Any other staff in this room? Head with me to the control room. Jerry, you can stay with me. And we will,
Head now or after the game?
right now.
Right now?
Jerry, Ryan, Rob, you're fine. Other staff,
I wasn't
head
listening.
with me.
But we're not, we're not gonna start the meantime.
It's really
Like, it was described in the one page. I was like,
Billy,
these are all the way. I don't know the names.
Yeah.
Still, like, no. Go any board score, Jerry?
I'll be board score.
Sorry.
Well, it's gonna be like, you need to say things.
Yeah, I know, and I know.
Things that are more concrete.
That you knew what you were talking about.
Well, no, I'm like, it's like the word just means that.
James, I thought you knew what you were talking about.
So what I was trying to say is, yeah, so what I